Everybody, welcome to Yerushalmi Chagigah Daf. We're up to Daf Yudches, brand new perik. Fangen that like a perik chomer ba kodesh mi betruma. There's a chomer of kodesh that we don't have betruma. What is that? Shemat bilin kelim atoich kelim. Betruma avaloy bekodesh. You can take one kli, put it into another kli. We'll see there's some limitations on this, and put it into the mikveh. And you're not worried that the top kli is chaytzitz the bottom kli, or vice versa. You can do it for truma, but not by kodesh. You have to take the kelim apart and put them in the mikveh separately. Acharayim b'toichu beis tzviyah b'truma avlo b'kodesh. The Mishnah says acharayim, the back of a keli, v'toich, the interior of the kli, ubeis tzviyah is the handle, kind of like a handle with grooves. And they would put your fingers on those grooves, and that's how you would hold on to the kli. So by truma, they consider to be three separate kalim, and touching one does not necessarily metama the other one. So if you touch the charaim, the toich may be tar. With tummy hands, obviously, we're talking about. And the same thing with Tzviya. This only applies for truma. By kodesh, we say no. By kodesh, you touch one, they all become tummy. Okay. Hanoises hamedris, noises hatruma, avaloi es hakodesh. Someone who is carrying a medris, like a shoe, that belongs to, that was Tomei medris from a zav. Noises truma, he can carry truma too, as long as the truma is in an earthenware keli. He's not directly coming into contact with truma, he can carry. But kodesh, even if it's in the same earthenware keli, he cannot carry it. Big derech truma medris lekodesh, like we learned yesterday. Like midas hakodesh midas hatruma, shebekodesh mater umenagev umatbil. If you're going to put a baguette into the mikveh, you have to you have to undo it. If there's, let's say, the sleeves are tied together, you have to undo it. You have to rinse it off, and then you can tevel it. V'achkach kosher, and then you can tie it if you want. Once you tevel it, truma kosher v'achkach mapel, you can tie it up and put it into the mikveh. We're not worried about a chatzitza. Kosher doesn't mean you have to kosher. Means if you want, you can even be kosher. Fine. Chaim HaKadosh Truma sagt the Gemara, Reb Chiya b'Shem Rabbi Yochanan b'Pnei Sha'oichlei Truma's reason, v'oichlei kodesh and his reason. The reason is, Rabbi Yochanan says that the reason that we're more makbid by kodesh than we are by truma is because oichlei truma is reason. Since truma is something that's constantly eaten, can be eaten, right? You could eat as long as you're kind of can eat anyway. And it's happening all the time. Mashenk and kodesh, the kohanim would only eat when they were in the base of Mikdash, and it was their turn, it was their mishmar. So therefore, we say that they're not zaris because they're not used to eating kodesh. That's maila. That's not a maila. Ilu dava. What is a maila? Ilu dava shushava bezeh bezeh tomer bezeh v'tor bezeh v'doi maila. In other words, I have two things. They're both equal in terms of underlying reasoning. I have no reason to want to be machmim. I want to makel by the other. That for all intents and purposes, the same thing. But then deswegen, I say one is tameh and a machmim, one is tar and a makel. That you say fine. That's a chaimer. Over here, give me a reason. You tell me why. Tell me because by truma people are more zaris because they're used to eating trumas. Therefore, they know to be careful. Mashenkin by kodesh. So that's two different reasons. Amalei. So I said to know to pata b'mezukak l'kodesh. The same guy eating truma is also eating kodesh. So we don't say, well, he's a zariz and he knows to be careful. Therefore, he doesn't have to be extra careful by kodesh. Kamashal, no. Even though obviously he's a zar, he's eating truma, doesn't matter, and he still has to be extra careful by kodesh, and that's what we're saying. That's the maila of kodesh. Let's say that there's davar tamei that was heavy. It weighed a liter. Aim might be nicer on top of another keli because that's too heavy, and what's going to happen is the top keli is chayitz, it's the bottom keli. Abishol actually limits the din, and the Mishnah is even more machmis. Forget about a liter. The only two kalim that you can tovel, one and the other, by truma, and only by truma, is a basket and a gargusni, which is a bigger basket. So you have two baskets, they're very porous, obviously. So there you can do it, but otherwise, no. Amr Rabbi Yochanan, actually, Abishol and Reb Shimon, Abishol and Reb Shimon both say the same thing. What is that? Tanina Tama, we learned over there. If you grab a person and stick him into the mikveh while holding on to him, he remains tame. Why? Because you grabbed him and you're holding on to him. In that area that you're grabbing, there's a chatzitza. Your hands don't let the water come through. However, if you take the same hands, you dip them into water first, you go to the sink, you wash your hands, and then you go and you grab the guy and stick him into the mikveh. In that case, he is tar. Why is he tar? Because the mayim that you rinsed your hands with, now that you've stuck your hands with this guy into the mikveh, it's mechober to the may mikveh and it becomes like may mikveh, and therefore there's no chatzitza. Reb Shimon, no, that's not good enough. Just washing your hands with water and then dipping the guy in no good. You have to hold the guy loosely so that there's no so that the water can come in between your hands and his body. Obviously, he holds that the maim is not enough. So, so there we see. So just like over here, we see Abba Shaul had a concern about two kelim being chaytzitz, unless it's two baskets. And Reb Shimon apparently seems to hold the same thing. You have to weaken your hands. Now, it's not just enough to dip your hands into water, according to Reb Shimon. You have to weaken your grip and then put the guy into the mikveh. So same thing. Issue is chatzitza. Rabbi Yochanan actually mistaber Reb Shimon yoidi Abba Shaul. Reb Shimon will agree to Abba Shaul because he goes so far as to say that even if you dipped your hands in the water first and then you grab the guy and put him into the water, you still should loosen your hands, even though you have a chiber over here. So since he's being so machmir, so you could say, okay, he'll agree with Abba Shaul by the case of the baskets by truma that taka can't be that you can't title them. Unless it's baskets by truma, you cannot title them. However, the other way around is not necessarily true. Abba Shaul lo yodel Reb Shimon. However, Abba Shaul will not necessarily agree to Reb Shimon. Why? Because Rabbi Shaul will hold that the fact that you went and you dipped your hands into water first, you washed your hands first, your hands were wet, you grabbed the guy while your hands were wet and stick him into the mikveh. Abba Shaul will say that's perfectly fine. You don't have to loosen your grip, like Reb Shimon says. I could hold that even if you don't loosen your grip, since your hands are wet, so the water that's in your hands while you grab the guy becomes a chibah to the mei mikveh, and therefore you don't have to. So you would say again, Reb Shimon agrees with Abba Shaul, but not necessarily true that Abba Shaul would agree with Reb Shimon. So Rabbanu the Kisrim B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan Alocha actually Kabba Shavat. Tani Kain Aloch Kidvar of like Abba Shaul. Rabbi Yoina. Now the following piece is there's a pshat from the Korban Eida and Chaim Kanievsky, and then Pnei Moshe has a pshat. Actually, it's a pshat that the art scroll actually brings down. There's a Pnei Moshe's pshat. We're going to go with that pshat, not because it's in the art scroll, but there's a the I you the question is what this is going on. So the Carbonate and the Chaim Kanievsky are learning that this piece that we'll start it now on Rabbi Yonah Masnita Reb Meir. The Mishnah is Reb Meir. Now, um, according to the Carbonate and the Chaim Kanievsky, it's going on the Kli, the Charayim, the Toich, and the Beis Hatzviyah. It's going on that, and they go through a very lengthy pshat to how to differentiate between the yadayim that are tmeis and yadayim that are tahiris and truma and kodesh. The Pnei Moshe has a much more straightforward pshat, which kinds of ties in to the next story. So to me, it made more sense to go with the pshat. The first time I learned this, I actually learned it with Reb Chaim Kanievsky. But I think based on the story brought down right after this, it makes more sense to go with the Pnei Moshe's pshat. And that is, Am Rabbi Yoina Masnita Reb Meir. Aval Chachamim, Aval Divrei Chachamim, Oisen Kain Afilu B'Kodesh. That this is going on the milas of Kodesh over Truma. And we had said that you could take one Kli, put it into another Kli, and tovel it by Truma, but not by Kodesh, right? So we said, so I'm Rabbi Yonah to Rabbi, there's Rabbi Yeshita, Divrei Chacham, Oisen Kain Afil B'Kodesh. Chacham are even more mekel. Chacham say, no, you're not limited to Truma, you could even do it by Kodesh. Take one Kli, put it into another Kli, and tovel it in the mikveh. And they also said, She'ein Beis Tzviyah, Toich Kli, the Beis Tzviyah, is not considered to be a separate toich kli, and instead kodesh kulon toich. When it comes to hektish, the hektish, it's not considered to be, as we saw in the Mishnah, three separate kalim. In other words, the charayim, the toich, which is the inner inside of the kli, the receptacle part of it, and then you have the handle, the base tviya. And no, they say that by kodesh it's all one. In other words, if one becomes tamei, the rest of them everything becomes tamei. Okay. Now, in light of what we're about to say, this pshat makes more sense to me because what are we discussing now? We're discussing the topic of chomer ba kodesh mi betruma. And now comes this story. There was a story. The seven chacham went to be ma'abed the shana. They had to make an ibiyar, and they went to do it in bikas rimoin. We'll see in a minute why dafka over there. Who are these seven? Zekanim, Reb Meir, Reb Yehuda, Reb Yosef, Reb Shimon, Reb Nechemi, Reb Elazar, Reb Yaakov, Reb Yochanan Sadla. Amr, they said, Kama malus by kodesh truma. How much the milus of kodesh do you have over truma? Now there were 11 that we saw. I won't go through them now. And this is why the story. This is why I learned with the Pnei Moshe because it fits very nicely in. If you're going to start learning with the Charaim, the Taich, and again, it does have to do with it, but it becomes much more complex. And I think over here, this pshat of Yaniyas Daiti and I'm nobody, but I think it flows nicer with the Pnei Moshe's pshat. Okay, so they said, Kama mal p'kodesh v'truma, Rabbi Yoam Shlosh, 13 miles that Kodesh has over Truma. Rabbi Yoam Shtemesrei, 12, Amar Rabbi Kach Shemati, Rabbi Kiva, Shlosh Esrei. Amalei Rabbi Yochanan Asandla Shimashtis Rabbi Kiva Oimdois Mashaloi Shimashti Yeshivas. I was Mishamish Rabbi Kiva much more than you, even Oimid. Forget about Yosef. And he never said anything about this. He said 12, not 13. Amru Rabbi Yochanan Asandla. So they said Alexandri Lamita. He's Lamita. He's 100% accurate. And still, even though they exchanged sharp words, they left there and kissing. In other words, they left as friends. And to show how close they were, each one didn't have this. I guess the goyla will be to Rabbana Shebeged, maybe it's the equivalent of a frak today. Have a chavre kota palga de gulsi, so his friend would cut off half of his frak, and give it to the other one. So there's two people took off half, and this way there was enough to go around enough halves. I guess I don't know who was missing it, but so everybody had a goyla. But that's how close they were. They were willing to rip off their goyla and give half to the next person. Lama Havdun came. Why did they rip off why did they have to put on the fracks? Because they were saying divrei Torah. So they came to say divrei Torah. So it's not doesn't pass to darshan divrei Torah without wearing a frack. Like the equivalent of today, walking in shorts and a tank top and starting to give a share. Doesn't go. So, okay, what were they dashning? It says a shirino lidida shiras doidi lekarmoi. Each one of them gave 7 pshatim at sheva apin, 7 different faces. In other words, gave 7 pshatim on this pasuk. The kalson lachraya ma'ashkech apoi begavo. And they were mekalis. They praised the last one who was able to find after he heard the other 6 come. Each one came with 7 pshatim. What's left to dash in his pasuk? He still found another 7 drushes. And Amrin, who was that last person? Reb Shimon Yochi Hava. It was Reb Shimon Yochi, that Reb Shimon that we mentioned stam in the beginning of the story was actually Reb Shimon Yochi. Lama have a dachkim freit gemara ba'ad freit gemara. I understand. Lama have a dachkim me'ato hadom milsa. Why do they have to take care of this right now in Bikas Rimun? Now the question is where exactly Bikas Rimun is. Was it in Yerushalayim? It was not. I'm sorry, it was not in Yerushalayim. So they're saying there's the issue that it was not in Yerushalayim. Is the issue just in terms of might not have been in Yehuda, and the Reb Chaim Kanievsky brings down that there's an Indian dafka to be Ma'abed Rishon in Yehuda. So, but whatever it was, why dafka over there? And it sounds like it was done like immediately. So they said the reason for the Gemara, the Havadarshan Mema, Elohim Seichel Sasalach, says in the Pasuk, Elohim Seichel Sasalach, don't make yourself an Avodah Zarah. Maxi Basra. What does it say after that? It's Chag Hamatzos Tishma, right? It's the next pasuk. The very next pasuk is Chag Hamatzos Tishma. So what does that mean? Amrun Kol Misha Speak Biyadoi La'abris Hashana Ve'enim Abra Kilu Avidah V'Zor. If you have an opportunity to go and be Ma'avid Hashana to make sure that the Mayad, the whole purpose of being Ma'avid Hashana is that Lahavdul we don't end up like the Mohammedans where they have their holidays come out once middle of winter, once middle of summer, in the fall, the spring. We have to keep Chaga, right? It's Chaga Asif, it's Chaga Aviv, Pesach has to be in the Aviv. So you have to be Ma'abed Shana to correct the calendar, so to speak. So over here, so if you have an opportunity to do it, and you're not Ma'abed Shana, it's like you are Avodah Zarah, because you have the Dorsh and Smuchas. Okay. When they were getting ready to leave, they said, we want to make sure, let's figure out if Nacho, we do a Nachas, Chen, Kadosh Baruch Hu, does the Kadosh Baruch Hu agree with what we did? V'avatamon chad kif tishayish, there was a pillar of marble or a stone, or like a boulder of marble. V'avakol chad v'chad nosav chad masmer v'kavale b'gavei. Each person took a nail and they put the nail into the marble, which obviously is a no easy feat to do. However, it went straight into the marble, like as if they were taking the nail and putting into dough, into kneaded dough. That's lisha, is kneaded dough. Those went in very easily, and they figured that's a sign they must have been doing the right thing. At kedoin miskri kipa misamra, and from that time it's called the boulder or the pillar of the nails, from based on this story that it happened. And that concludes Daf Yud Ches.